culturally relevant conversations from a global perspective. Today, we're reaching all the way over to Johannesburg, South Africa. 30 years since democracy. 30 years. Y'all remember when Nelson Mandela came to Los Angeles and filled up the Coliseum there, and we welcomed our brother home after being elected the president of South Africa, released from the penitentiary 27 years for standing up for the rights of the people, overturning the evil system of apartheid. Now it's 30 years later. They're celebrating over there. Or are they? Or what's going on? How's things going in South Africa 30 years after the dismantling of apartheid? So, Pastor Kelvin Sauls, our friend, our partner, our homie, he's over there in his hometown. Let's bring him in live from Johannesburg and give us some real perspective. You know how we do it. Good
yes,
morning.
sir.
Good afternoon.
Good. It's actually good evening over here, man. So we are welcoming Tuesday evening as you all have welcomed Tuesday morning, and that's just how it rolls, Yes. Evening here is morning there is evening here. So I call that the transnational ministry that I'm involved in right now.
Nice. It's almost
good to be with you, man.
So it's fall right now too, right?
Yes, it's fall.
You ready to be winter?
Man, winter is knocking on the door, brother. Straight up knocking on the door.
Wow. Isn't that something? So first of all, how does it feel to be home? And tell the people exactly where you are.
It's good to be home, and I'm actually really home because I'm in my hometowns of Kliptown and Dorado Park. I was born in Kliptown. That's a very significant town as it relates to the struggle for freedom in South Africa. And then, we were forcibly removed from Kliptown by the apartheid regime. I think I was like in the 3rd or 4th grade. Didn't know what was going on. Just was told one day by my parents, we got to move, And so we moved into an area that wasn't even ready to be occupied. And so we occupied it. And we called it Hashville initially because, when you moved out somewhere where you're supposed to be moved to, got to be ready. And when it wasn't ready, our parents said, well, you know what? Even if it ain't ready, we're moving in. And we're going to make this community and make it home. And that's Dorado Park, which is right next to Kliptown, which is right next to Soweto. Dorado Park is actually part of the greater Soweto area, around that. But one of those neighborhoods or communities that was created, by the apartheid regime. So I'm actually, let's say maybe about 5 minutes from my family home where I grew up. So it's good to be home, man.
Yeah. I've walked through the streets and alleys of Kliptown a few times over there, And, as people listen to us talking about Soweto and, they have to understand this is a huge place. And last I heard was more than 4 million people living in the Black township of Soweto in general. And that includes Dorado Park, yes?
Yes, it does. And, Dorado Park, Soweto initially was supposed to be created for specific ethnic groups. But all of these, areas are now, multiracial. In fact, I should say, gentrification has reached Soweto.
What?
Soweto, basically, just to help folk understand, stands for Southwestern Townships. And a township was basically, the dictionary calls a township just a place or a community. Of course, under apartheid, it received a derogatory, name. It was basically a throwaway place for, non-whites, blacks, Africans, whoever wasn't white. It was just a field somewhere, and it was just saying that those who were moved to the city, that's where you're going to go. But you know how we are as black folk. You know, we can take lemonade and make a lemon meringue pie out of it, man. And that's what happened. So, you know, these places then became, of course, you know, bastions, if you will, of resistance. And now, you know, even though still a lot of challenges going on, guess what? You know, some folk gentrifying it, man. They you know, it's hip for a white person now to, you know, to roam around in Soweto, not being concerned about something happening to them, even though during apartheid nothing was going to happen to them anyway. But anyway, you know, it is what it is. But yes, about 4 million people and growing. You know, my Dorado Park is probably a community that's about probably around about 250,000 people. You know, in terms of that. So so that's what's happening right now. I mean, it's quite intriguing, interesting, enlightening, but in some ways also very, very painful.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. I'm listening to you, Pastor Sauls. I've known you for a little while now, and I'm just contrasting. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. When you see the Black Panthers, Martin Luther King, that's my childhood. You know what I'm saying? And I often, in my consciousness, think back to those days, and I think back to how my parents were, you know, preparing our minds, our consciousness for a better day for Black Americans. And we were always on the move. And like you say, you know, we're taking lemonade and making lemon meringue pie, right? And so, you know, and I'm listening to you, you know, what are your reflections as a grown man now, you know, when you think back and you're very conscious, very active, all about, I label you the gospel of social justice is what I say right there. And so, you know, how do you contrast your experience growing up and living in an apartheid society to what you're seeing now, 30 years later?
Well, I mean, you know, I was actually glad to come home, you know, during this time. What actually got me to come home early, I was scheduled to be here in May, you know, and in June, but really I had to come home early because I lost my oldest brother. And even though I couldn't get to the funeral, I wanted to get home as soon as I can, just to be with family. And that's what happened this past weekend, you know, in terms of that. But, you know, how things just work out. And so the coming home early basically then culminated, you know, also with, you know, a Freedom Day, which is April the 27th. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very interesting, you know, Greg, to really, you know, work, you know, around what does this mean? Mm-hmm. And so my, you know, nonprofit here is called Beloved Community Coalition. And so, you know, we were thinking about, okay, what do we do with this, right? You know, there was, you know, a sense of excitement on the one hand, a sense of exhaustion on the other hand. You know, people didn't know, you know, do we celebrate? Do we commiserate? you know, do we look for some fireworks? You know, so a lot of ambiguity and ambivalence, you know, around this. In fact, you know, we are aware of the fact that, you know, none of the foreign missions of South Africa, you know, that means your embassies, your around the world, or your consulates, did not, you know, have any, you know, events around this, you know, what we were told was because of austerity measures, and a lot of us are pissed off about that, you know, yeah. And so we just, you know, went to work, and I knew I was going to be here, so we mobilized, you know, our partners here, and we basically organized, right, you know, 2 events, one in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg, you know, around that, because we you know, we said that, you know, even if you commiserate, you know, let this be a continued invitation for you to reflect on where we are and do a critical reflection on that, but also to begin to reach out around where we need to, you know, go around that. And I'll share about those events, you know, a little later on. But that's really what the sense was for us. It was really as an organization, let's look for ways to bring people together, convene people, because it is a public holiday. It's like July 4th, for us. But there was no July 4th feeling, right? And part of it is because, the democracy is fragile right now. The economy, has been mismanaged. There's a lot of corruption going on. So, and that's why people are talking about, hey man, what's there to celebrate? What's there, or is this going to be about commiserating? And so we said, listen, we're going to throw a conscience party, right? Because there is still much to celebrate, even though we still have to go a long way. And even though we are not where we need to be, we sure enough not where we used to be. And I think that was very, very important for us, to say, even though it's not yet Uhuru, right? Let us continue now to look for ways to see, how do we grow deeper, into understanding our constitutional democracy, and to see whatever it is that we need to do, to remind folk that freedom is not free, right? Help me out, Angela Davis. It is a constant struggle. And so, at 30 years, man, we are still, struggling. So luta continua, because we are moving, maybe at a slower pace, maybe at a pace that none of us, expected. But at least, there continues to be, movement as we now march on from April the 27th to May the 29th, where we will have national elections, around that. And so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you about that. It's also an election year, so I'm listening to you and I'm feeling like, okay, your work with regard to the 30th anniversary is important because you want to continue to tell the story, remind the people, and then educate the young people that are coming up. And then maybe that drives consciousness to vote. I listen to quite a bit of South African radio, so I'm a little familiar with what's going on in the presidential elections. And it's so funny because it sounds like Jacob Zuma is trying to do a Donald Trump on him, a little bit. It's kind of interesting. Dude got indictments and jail sentences going on when he said, I'm going to run anyway.
Hey, look. Let me say this, man. On a serious note, this is 2024 is a pivotal year around elections around the world. I mean, just look at significant, elections. National elections that's going to be taking place. In South Africa, of course, in November, the United States, and in several other countries. People have, kind of called 2024 almost like the Super Bowl of presidential elections. And I agree with that because it's really going to determine the future, of, the world, because you have, the world's most powerful nation, the United States. Democracy is fragile. You have an illegitimate candidate that's been legitimized by, white supremacy, in the United States. In South Africa, we're dealing with, a government that has mismanaged, our democracy. And as a progressive and prophetic pastor, I say that unapologetically. We've feasted on flashbacks, in South Africa, and we've gone down the path of, broken promises. And so here we are, in, really a country that is supposed to be a constitutional democracy, but for the last 30 years, people have been bamboozled to think more of it as a partisan, a constitution. And so at Beloved Community Coalition, our civic engagement campaign, you see, is all about, reminding people that this is a constitutional democracy, just like the United States is a constitutional democracy. And so wherever I go right now, I travel, with all my stuff on my Audible, right? I travel with 2 physical books wherever I travel right now. One is the Constitution of the United States of America, and the other one is the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, because that grounds, I think, one's dignity and humanity in something that is deeper and broader than party politics, party colors, a party ideology, et cetera, et cetera. And so we find ourselves now in a state where we basically have to now awaken, right? The electorate, because they have been lulled into a deep sleep, such as trust us, we won't take care of you, and trust us, we're gonna move the country forward. Trust us, we're gonna be about equality and equity. And yet, here we are. South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. It's the most violent countries in the world. And I look at looking at South Los Angeles and looking at South Africa. There are some real similarities here, Greg. That there's an intersection. This is the intersection I live in. In terms of the under-resourced communities from South Africa to South LA, right? Your zip code determines the longevity and the quality of your life. It's the same thing over here, in South Africa. Healthcare abysmal, in terms of what's happening with who have access, who doesn't have access. It's the same thing going down from South Los Angeles, to South Africa. Economies, that continues to try its best to do whatever it can with an economic system that I call racial capitalism or plantation capitalism, right? That continues to just be about extraction and exploitation, treating people as products as well as community as commodities, around that. Same thing happening from South Africa, to the United States. So this year, between the elections in the USA and the elections in the RSA, we are on the brink, of being enveloped, right, by uncertainty, enveloped by an undermining of democracy, as we navigate these times.
Yeah, I have a friend over there in Johannesburg. He's a retired broadcaster, and he used to always say to me, "Man, Brother Greg, this democracy is not easy," and he would share that with me. When I listen to the business reports on South African news and radio stations and TV stations, I get the distinct sense that the United States economy has a tremendous effect on the South African economy. It's important for the news, the business news, to include what is happening on the New York Stock Exchange, which corporations are moving in and out of South Africa and all of that. And I'm wondering, since right now, the United States tried to gather the world behind, its actions in Ukraine. And I know that South Africa was like, well, no. And a few other things on the geopolitical scale where South Africa, you can see consciously on the surface, at least, that they're trying to stand up on their own. And this is happening all over the continent of Africa. I mean, we are, throwing off the vestiges of colonialism after all. But I do get the distinct impression that the United States economy is tied into South Africa quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is, because the United States, its economy is built on settler colonization. Its economy is built on military occupation. Its economy is built on economic exploitation. Its economy is built on environmental degradation. So the U.S. economy is inextricably connected to the economies of a lot of communities and countries, people and places, because, the United States is a conqueror. The United States continues to engage in new settler colonization and new military occupation and new economic exploitation. You see, and how it works. It is just like it would do, internally. It really pushes communities, like it did with indigenous people in the United States. And after that, the human trafficking, enterprise called enslavement, right, is to push people to the brink of dependence or extinction, and then you bring in, a free, as it was with our ancestors. And I can say our ancestors both in the U.S. and in South Africa, because this is kind of how I live and have my being, right? To then facilitate, the labor market, right? And then, after, all of that, you create the sense of, dependence, not interdependence, and not even, independence, but the sense of dependence. So that happened domestically in the U.S., and it also happened, internationally in the United States. So yes, there's a lot of dependence going on, and the U.S. do whatever it can to pull those, strings, and it's really not interested in trade, but aid that's connected with how we control, even, how you will govern around that. That is taking place. And that's why you see, Blinken, burning gas all over the world, trying to put out fires, right? That was started by, U.S. foreign policy. So yes, it's all inextricably connected, Craig. I wish it could have been connected more interdependent, but it's not, because that's not how a colonizer functions, right? That's not how an occupier functions. You see what I'm saying? In terms of that, it is, pushing countries, to the brink of dependence, which is what it did internally, with indigenous people, etc. And then through that, then try to see how they can determine, its future. But unfortunately, that is not going to work, man, because the emperor has no clothes on. Yeah. And the Biden-Harris administration, including, through Blinken and everyone else running around the world, from Haiti, to what's happening, in Palestine, just, with fork-tongue diplomatic relations, that is just not working. And part of it is because it's an extractive, exploitive model that's being pushed and promoted.
Now, with your organization there, in El Dorado Park, what do you see is, we're talking, we're stating facts, no doubt, but as you know, it always comes down to the people, and organizations, community-based organizations are really a strong conduit to, progress within our communities, our underserved communities. What do you see as the biggest need, and how is your organization the most effective in these changing times?
Yeah. Well, our organization, as I said, is a coalition. It's called Beloved Community Coalition. And our mission is to organize and mobilize people power for social change, for a systemic change, to try and see how we can, really analyze, the systems that create, that break people, right? And to see how, as we analyze, to then see how do we now organize and mobilize people power so that we can move from breaking to bridging to building to becoming, so that everybody can experience equitable belonging. That's really the work that we're doing. So it's a very, very grassroots organizing model. For me, what we're trying to do is bring together, MLK and Ella Baker and Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela and Medgar Evers, right? And I mean, all of it together in terms of, it's in the end, it's about Sizwe. And Sizwe just means the people. Yeah. And what has happened, for instance, in the US and in South Africa is, governments and the Biden-Harris administration is no exception. They do whatever they can just to allow people to sleep. Sure. I think the Obama-Biden administration did that very, very well, because after, Obama was elected, everybody thought that we've achieved Dr. King's dream. But you see, people don't listen to the full speech. They just listen to, they treat the speech as a buffet, right? I'm just going to pick what I want to pick at a certain time, and that's why the conservatives are having a good time, with the speech because of that. So I think, what needs to happen is we need to really encourage people to really take to heart the fact that these two countries are constitutional democracy. Mm-hmm. We get too caught up in party politics and ideologies, and not, look at, platforms and how it connects as close as possible to what the Constitution is. Because who we are, citizens in this country, our rights are enshrined, not with the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party. It's enshrined in the Constitution. And the same thing in South Africa. Our human rights, and South Africa is one of the most progressive, constitutions in the world. Our rights are enshrined in that Constitution. It's not with the ANC. It's not with the PAC. It's not with, the EFF. It's not with the PA. You know what I'm saying? No, your rights are in the Constitution. Wake up to the Constitution. Be aware of what it is and let that awareness lead you to action. And so we basically trying to go back to basics, which is, on one end, community-based organizing, faith-based organizing, inviting people to ask the question that Ella Baker asked when she was organizing, in Mississippi and other, southern states. What do you want to achieve? Mm. What is quality of life for you? Mm. And then start from there and examine the platforms that these parties put out and move beyond personality.
Now, in the South African Constitution, there's what? Is it 7 points? How many are there? I can't remember now. I know I saw, but I know that the South Africans are very, very proud of the crafting of the Constitution. And how many points are in there?
You got me now.
Like right there in Freedom Square, they have the Constitution.
The pillars. Yeah, I think it's 7 pillars.
7 pillars.
I'll get it for you before we leave.
All right, that's
right. Good to just mention them. Yes. Uh-huh. But yeah, and that's what's so important about getting to know that, because what I believe is, once speaking as South Africans, mm-hmm. Because sometimes here it's the same thing like we are in the States. If you don't want Black folk to know something, just put it in the book, right? Mm-hmm. Because people just has this thing that we don't read, even though we know we read, right? Yeah. But if we just get to know and understand how we can utilize that Constitution as a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And where I am right now, and where I was born down the street from where the Freedom Charter was signed in 1955. And the Freedom Charter is the foundation of the Constitution. That means in 1955, right after Apartheid became the law of the land in 1948, right? People gathered on a field in Kliptown and basically brought together resistance and reimagination. You feel me? They were saying, look, we're going to resist what went down in 1948, but we're also going to reimagine. And so that meant that they chose to become protagonists of a free and democratic society, even though it only happened in 1994. You see what I'm saying? But that's because they had a point of departure. They had a destination that they want to get to. And that's why I believe it's important for us, even in the United States, to hold together resistance, because that invites us into re-existence. And through that re-existence, then engage in reimagination. Mm-hmm. And if we do reimagination, we become protagonists for our destination.
A point of history, I was wondering, when I remember so clearly that there was so much, the voices of the people were so amplified in favor of freeing Mandela, in gaining independence, freedom for our people, our brothers and sisters over in South Africa. It was a big deal. You had the big divestment programming that was coming out of UCLA and other universities across the country. You had, Brother Randall Robinson with this Trans
Africa.
Yeah. Yes. So many, personalities. It was the voice, right, of Black America. And I couldn't find it for this discussion. I was looking for it very hard, but man, that Joe Biden, he was a senator, and he's on one of the committees. You know how they have those committee hearings, and I think it was George Shultz in that time was like the Secretary of State, and he was very resistant, George Shultz, to, and I think this is under Reagan even, if I'm
Yes.
So George Shultz
Under
is
Reagan.
like very hesitant to, to support the abolishment of apartheid, and Joe Biden as a senator is just giving him the business in this exchange. He really can't believe that America would stand for a system like apartheid, and the United States was kind of dragging its feet for support, of the regime. And that's what I think now it's bringing it forward to present day. What I see in the news coming out of South Africa is there's a very strong voice that's reminding America that, hey, when we needed you to stand with us, you really weren't there. How do you are very patriotic, I see, carrying around the Constitution and everything. How do you balance what is your perspective over the generations when you know that the history of the United States has been what it is? How do you, as a South African, reconcile, I guess is the word, the attitudes of the United States when your nation needed freedom?
Well, I mean, again, for me, I put it in the context of the fact that, the United States, is built around settler colonization. It's built around military occupation. It's built around economic exploitation. It's built around environmental degradation. For me, if I put it within that perspective, right, it really helps me to measure what to expect, you see, in terms of that. Because, through colonization and through, occupation, a settler country or a settler-related country or settler-influenced country, right, really thrives on deception and division. It thrives on dominance and discrimination, right? And it's going to do whatever it can, to see how, wherever there is a threat to that, how that can be slowed down, right? And how it can support that, because that essentially is how that's what its soul is deeply and deliberately connected to. So we were not surprised that the U.S., was part and parcel, in cahoots with, in solidarity with the apartheid regime. Even before apartheid became the law of the land, you see, the U.S., basically supported this enterprise here that had those 4 quad evils, you see, in terms of that. So I think when one puts it in that perspective, then you can have, the hypocrisy that on the one hand, as a senator, Senator Biden was staunchly, challenging, what apartheid was doing, and right now, he's bypassing Congress, right, to get funds, to apartheid Israel. You see what I'm saying? For it to engage in what happened over here. All this stuff is connected, man. If you look at those who are supporting what's going on right now in Palestine, they've all engaged in genocide. Come on now. I mean, Germany, come on now, help me out. The UK, come on now, help me out. Australia, come on now, help me out. Canada, right now, you see what I'm saying? Their support of the current, genocide. It's because they're trying to figure out how to deal with that which has infected and affected their soul and their spirit, around it. So how do I reconcile it? I reconcile it by basically, one, pledging a higher allegiance. That's one, you see, and say that, I may be a citizen, of, these countries, but, there is a citizen, there's a citizenship that I call a citizenship that's about a moral cause. There is a way of being a citizen that is prophetic. There is a way of being a citizen that is all about, justice and fairness and equitable belonging for everybody. That's how I reconcile it. So, tomorrow there is Workers' Day here. It's May 1st. We're going to be out there fighting for workers' rights. You see what I'm saying? Right. If I was, right now in South LA, I'll be on the campus of USC, right, or UCLA. You see what I'm saying? I was in New York before I left for South Africa. We were on the campus of, of Columbia, challenging. That's how I reconcile it, by saying, no government has the last say, right, on the dignity and the humanity of people. That's why people has to rise up. You see what I'm saying? Because that's what democracy in the end is all about.
I need my organ. Praise break. Yes, sir. Man. This is real talk right here. Now, okay. So now, as what I notice, here in America, the African American community has really got its eyes focused on, what is life going to be like for us in America? If the Trumpster wins or not, what the heck is going on, whereby our consciousness to think global, because I think we really do. I'm on the point where we really need to think globally and be aware of what's happening in South Africa and other African nations, as well as what's happening here, in America. What would you say to those of us in America, Black Americans, who do have that type of consciousness? What should we be thinking about and concerned about when we look at the Republic of South Africa?
I think we are where we are in South Africa because African Americans stood up for our freedom. Let me be very, very clear. I will forever be filled with gratitude, right? Because of what, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, what she has done, Randall Robinson, Harry Belafonte, right? What Stevie Wonder, artists, for free South Africa, right? All that they've done. Even during the time of the independence movement, Dr. King was acutely aware of what was happening. That's why, in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, in the last chapter, he moves beyond beloved community and talks about God's beloved world house. Yes. Because he realized, right, that we cannot just fight for our human rights in the United States without realizing, right, that we are in the belly of the beast that's causing havoc, running drive-bys, economically, military, and otherwise around the world, right? Our human rights in the United States must be directly connected with the human rights struggles of people around the world. You see, in terms of that, and so it has to be what I call global, bringing the global and the local together. People say, during an election time, everything is local. Yes, it is local. It is local. Just go look at your cupboard and look at your closet, right? And you see where those clothes are made and where that food's coming from, right? It is local. So that means you got to be concerned about what the U.S. is doing in those countries. Right? And let's be real about why people are following the money. You see what I'm saying? In terms of, crossing borders, because their products, right, can cross. Why can they cross? You see what I'm saying? Especially if the crossing is taking place because of exploitive, foreign policies. So what I say to, my African American sisters and brothers, because, I consider myself as an integral part of that community, standing on the bold and broad shoulders of those who've gone before us, right? Sure. We cannot sit on our laurels. Let's face it, we fell asleep. It's time to woke the hell up right now. You see what I'm saying? Because evil, discrimination, exploitation, those who built this country in such a way that we ought to be on the outside, or that we ought to be, on the low side. You see what I'm saying? They strategizing 24/7 to make that happen. That's why we are where we are, right? We are where we are because, during Obama, you see what I'm saying? We found ourselves, between, Barack and a hard place. Yeah. Literally between Barack and a hard place. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And we have to come to terms with the fact is that whenever, as African Americans, and I would right now say as Black immigrants, when we give our best, right, white supremacy will get so pissed off. Their fragility will just be so out there that they'll elect, you see, a Donald Trump. You see, that's how they express rage, right? That they would arm themselves, and justify, that by, an outdated law. That's the law they got to go look at instead of, bringing out a law, hello Arizona, around, threatening, the rights, of women and their womb. So it's time to put on our seatbelt, get back into the fight. There is no room for spectators, man. Yeah. And I say to my Christian sisters and brothers, okay, now is not the time to be so heavenly bound and no earthly good. All right. We ought to come to terms with decolonizing Jesus Christ and start understanding, that this Christ, who grew up, under colonization, in occupation. You see what I'm saying? Through exploitation. If you look at, what his parents were doing and in all of that. This is the fight that we've got to get into and stop being bamboozled, and lied to, right? With this practice of narrative injustice, with folk just making up stuff and using the Bible and folk just falling for it, right? I really want to invite us to really become aware of what it means to follow a Jesus that represents a peaceable realm, right? Right. True shalom expressed in a belonging that's about beloved community and Ubuntu. I think that's what we as African Americans, that's what we as Black folk, that's in our soul. Not just resistance, but reimagination. And now's the time to bring those two together more than ever. You see what I'm saying? And my sense about it is, given whose shoulders we stand on, man, look, I'm going to work hard to make sure that the right person is elected. But if the right person is not elected, Greg, right? Behind mountains are more mountains. You see, I want to say to us, get ready to do whatever we can to be protagonists of a just and fair United States. And if that doesn't happen, use the momentum that we have, right? And call on the spirit of Harriet Tubman, and call on the spirit of James Weldon Johnson, and call on the spirit of Rosa Parks, and call on the spirit of Ella Baker, and call on the spirit of Medgar Evers, and call on the spirit of all those who've gone before us who had less than what we get right now. But they showed up for the fight. They showed up for the fight. Too many of us stop showing up for the fight because we've chosen to drink the Kool-Aid. And the Kool-Aid, y'all, it's expired.
It's expired. I mean, you can really just see.
The American pie, y'all, expired.
The war.
Expired. Yeah. Let's be protagonists, of beloved community, God's beloved world house, and make sure, that we're not just concerned about what happens, domestically, but also internationally.
Pastor Sauls, I want to ask you this question. I mean, before we get out of here, we just watched them approve billions upon billions of dollars to go to Israel and Ukraine. Like, if they have that kind of money, why are there so much like homelessness and, why are the groceries so high? What? I'm like, wait a minute. How, as one who, especially on the whole homeless front, I know you are a general in this space here. How does that make you feel? Like when you see them, they're able to give these folks overseas kabillions of dollars, but we are overcome with the unhoused community. The groceries are so high, the gasoline is so high. We're like, what is going on?
You see, I mean, I really encourage folk, Greg, to connect the dots here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sisters and brothers and siblings who happen to be homeless or houseless, right? They are experiencing, a policy, of the movement of people as a result of, economic systems. I mean, let's just face it, right? I mean, let's just take Los Angeles, one of the most wealthiest cities in the country, if not the world. California is a nation state, right? And to have opulence in such close proximity to abject poverty shows the moral crisis that plantation and racial capitalism has put us into. Ain't no such a thing as invisible hand, man. We know that there's a hand that's moving stuff, connecting streets and suites, right? And we know the color of that hand.
Yeah.
More importantly, we know the history of that hand, you see, around us. It's all connected to how we just, by way of economic forces, that somebody's, somewhere, by way of systems and policies, right, just feel that they can just move people, whether it is moving people, both young and our elderly, right, out of their homes from one community to another community, or from one continent to another continent. I hope you know where I'm going to now.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I mean, homelessness, gentrification is directly connected with what happened with the Middle Passage, with the Trail of Tears. It's connected with folk coming through the Sonora Desert. All these things are connected, man. We just name them differently, and let's call it what it is. Our homeless sisters and brothers are internally displaced.
Mm-hmm.
Folk don't want to call it that because the United Nations has some policies and some rules around what needs to happen with internally displaced people. You see, it'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court will say about this. But given who's on the Supreme Court, a reflection, right, of hypocrisy,
sure,
a theology of hypocrisy, an ideology, of inequity, right? Sure. In terms of that. So we ought not to look at what's happening with our, siblings, that are houseless, that are unsheltered, as that different from what happens regionally and nationally and internationally around the displacement and the movement of people, and what role the economy plays in that. And the economy is controlled by policies. But when you get this close to plutocracy, you know what I'm saying? Where Boeing can inspect its own planes, we ought not to be surprised at what's happening with that. And this stuff is all connected, man. You see, and that's basically what, conservative, nationalist politics, are all about. People are products, communities are commodities. Mm-hmm. And in the end, the bottom line is, how much money we can make, right? Yeah. And you and I know, you as a person of faith, I'm a person of faith. It's about making meaning in the end.
Yeah.
It's about making meaning. And that meaning we're making is the might that we have to see how it can move forward shalom and equitable belonging for everyone.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Pastor Sauls, I know you're on the case all over the globe. You said glocal. That's our word for the day, glocal, And so, and as we go out, tell the people how we can get a hold of you. And then also just mention a little bit about Workers' Day. You mentioned that you're going to be out during the, that's a national holiday as well, huh?
Yes, national holiday in South Africa ain't the United States. They kind of created Labor Day, and then, we know what happens on Labor Day, right?
Labor Day.
Here in South Africa, we celebrate Workers' Day just like folk all around the world because we center workers. We center the humanity and dignity of workers. And so tomorrow there will be several marches all across South Africa challenging the policies of the government that's undermining workers, even though workers played a huge role in the liberation, of South Africa. We're going to have some of our partners, will be at Revolution Square in Havana, Cuba, where there will be up to about 1 million people, centering again the lives of workers, because as you know what Cuba is going through around what the United States is facilitating there in terms of a slow motion genocide. That's what I call that, because of the illegal blockade and all of that. So really Workers, Day, or May Day as it's called, it's really, saying to workers, look, we value you. We want you to have a livable wage. We want for you to earn enough so you can care for your family, so you can live quality of life, so that you can be safe in your workplace, and so that you can, have, the necessary conditions conducive, for you not to just produce, but actually for you to, live as well, and participate, in life around that. So that's what's going to happen, tomorrow. And then, as I mentioned, the Beloved Community Coalition, that's our organization that I co-founded here in South Africa. You can check them out at www.becocco.org. And you can see what we did, this past weekend, our Conscience Party in Cape Town, as well as, in, Johannesburg. We sponsored, or co-sponsored, I should say, with Swaliga Foundation Africa. We co-sponsored an international spoken word and visual art family festival, because we wanted to center the arts and the role it played in the liberation movement in South Africa. And like Nina Simone said, we wanted to rally artists, and invite them into a time of reimagination. And boy, they brought it on Saturday night, man. It was on and popping, in terms of just the spoken word artists, that came, the music, that came. We had a spoken artist from Los Angeles, Leroy Moore, Halima joined us from Jackson, Mississippi, and also our folk at Karibuni, in Havana, Cuba, joined with us, in just, saying, hey, we're going to do whatever we can to let our art be a path to us being protagonists, for a just and fair South Africa and a just and fair world. As for me, I'm on Instagram as Pastor_Sauls. I'm not on Twitter anymore because, I'm not down with that white supremacist called Elon Musk. And also, Faith Without Borders is on YouTube. That's my podcast that I do.
So you said becocco.org or .com?
.org. Mm-hmm.
Sure. All right. That one's in the chat. You know how we do it. Okay. Very good, my brother. Very good. Thank you so much for coming today. Always. Man, look, when you come back home.
Hey, man, I got you anytime from anywhere, man. Wherever I can find Wi-Fi, wherever there's a light. You see the light over here that shines on me, you know what I'm saying? I try to do what I need to do to speak truth to power in love, because in the end, the revolution is about the love-evolution, man.
Love-evolution, yes, sir. Love one another, y'all. That's what we're doing right here. Love one another. That's what we always are coming from, always centered on that sacred order that we got from our Jesus, the Christ. All right, Pastor Sauls, thank you so much, eh?
All right, man. I say to everyone, Sawubona, we see you. You are visible. You got dignity. You have humanity. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, y'all. Coffee Conversations is available on our Facebook page, Coffee Conversations with Greg J. On the website, beachcityradio.com. YouTube, just go ahead and like and subscribe on that playlist. You'll get all the Coffee Conversations with Greg J right there. We also repurpose the audio and put that out there as a podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast, Spreaker, Apple, Spotify, iHeart. Just punch in Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Love one another, y'all. Peace and blessings.